Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to join us today for this webinar. My name is Beatrice Orr, and I am certified and licensed behavior analyst in the state of Arizona. I'm a clinical manager and Hispanic outreach coordinator for the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center in Phoenix, Arizona. Let me see. Let's go ahead and save all the questions till the end. I think it's going to make a little bit more sense because your questions might actually be answered in later slides. So I think it's going to keep us on track if we keep our questions till the end, okay? So today we're going to be talking about pivotal response treatment, or PRT, which is an intervention based on the principles of applied behavior analysis. Let's see here. Okay, so there's a lot that we could talk about pivotal response treatment. We could be here for days. But for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to focus on three main components, and those are motivation, natural reinforcement, and being contingent. Okay, and if you read about pivotal response treatment, there's a lot more that you'll find, but these three probably are going to be the most important ones to focus on in a 1-hour webinar. So let's talk a little bit about the motivational procedures, but let's start with the history of PRT, because it seems like there's a little bit of misconception about how new PRT is. And definitely in the West Coast, it's been around a little bit longer, and it's slowly making its way to the East Coast. But PRT actually has been around for quite a while, has been researched for about 30 years. And the way that it started is Robert and Lynn Cagle. Those are the developers of PRT. And Robert Cagle did his PhD actually under Ivar Lovaas at UCLA, mainly focused on discrete trial. And when he graduated, he decided to start his own thing, and he went to the University of California, Santa Barbara. And he was really ready to replicate what Lovaas had at UCLA. What he realized was discrete trial model as it was back then, it was really hard for parents to either afford somebody to provide the treatment for that many hours a week. And it was really clinical, so for parents to learn how to implement it themselves. So what he decided to do is, how can I use what I know is effective, like discrete trial and an intervention within behavior analysis, right? Following the same principles. So how do I follow the same principles, making it a little bit more accessible to parents? And that was his whole goal. And that's how PRT started. So that was the first thing. One of the greatest challenges that sometimes we face, not always of course, but sometimes we face when we work with individuals with autism, is their lack of motivation to join in and join in conversations, join in social interactions. So that's where his focus was mainly on motivation. How do we get these kids to want to interact with us versus how do we make them interact with us, right? So he's really trying to change that initial goal of really how do we change that for them to want to be with us. So that's where the motivational procedures will come, which I'll talk a little bit in later slides. And then the next thing is creating opportunities in the natural environment. As we know, some kids or some individuals with autism have a hard time generalizing skills. So they might learn something really well when you are in a certain environment, let's say home, let's say a clinic, let's say school, but they have a hard time sometimes generalizing those skills and using those skills that they have in a different environment. So if you learn something at school, are they going to be able to transfer those skills and use them in a grocery store, for example, or at grandma's house? So what he decided to do while they were, as a team, creating or developing PRT is, how do we embed generalization as part of the intervention so we don't have to add it later on? So we don't have to teach a kid to generalize? How do we just do it naturally? And that's where really implementing PRT in the natural environment, that's how it all started. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of examples. I think it's great to talk about all these things, but to actually see it in action makes a lot more sense. So let's go ahead and let me get my little cheating sheet here on how to show you videos. So you're going to see an example, a case study of a family that came through one of our programs, which is for recently diagnosed kids or at-risk kids, and the idea is to empower the parents. So we focus on teaching the parent how to implement PRT. So on the first video, you're going to see a mom interacting with her child. The instructions were, go ahead and interact with your child, try to get her to communicate with you, just do what you normally do. So let's go ahead and see that. Give me 1 second.
Mommy do drum. Can you do drum? Why are you throwing stuff? Ready? Mommy's gonna do the drum. Drum, 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 drum. Magic drum like in Diego? Does Diego have a magic drum? Okay. Don't throw it. Don't throw it. Don't throw it. Come on. Let's see what else is in here. I have a maraca. And you can have some maraca. Exactly. You take them. Shake on mommy. Ready?
Right. So in that video, the first question that we ask ourselves is the child communicating? You can't see it. You didn't see anything? Can anybody see the video? Got it now. Okay, perfect. I can, thanks. Okay, perfect. Just let me know if you guys can. Okay, so when we look at that interaction, we really focus on a couple of things. Is this child communicating? And the answer is yes, she actually is communicating, just not necessarily the most appropriate way, not necessarily the easiest way to understand, but at the same time, it's actually pretty clear, right, that she doesn't want to play with that drum, and she really doesn't want to play with mom. And the second question that we ask ourselves when we look at a baseline video like this is, who was in control of that interaction? And even though it seemed like mom was trying to be, really the little girl was the one that was in control. She's the one choosing what to play with, what not to play with, and mom was just trying. So this is a very common interaction that we see. This mom is really trying her best, using very regular strategies that you would use with your little girl, but the child is really not responding, or not responding the way we would like her to. So now I'm going to show you a video that is a final. So this is a 4-week program, 2.5 hours, about 5 hours each week. And after 4 weeks, I want you to see the final video. And I really want you to focus on the same 2 questions. Is the child communicating? And who's in control of that interaction?
Open. Open. Shake them. Guitar.
All right. So in this interaction, was the child communicating? This time she also was communicating, but now we're teaching her a more appropriate way to communicate. She's starting to use some approximations, right? So we could hear her say maraca, we could hear her say guitar. Another important thing is who's in control of this interaction. And at this time, actually both of them are in control. And that's one of the things that makes PRT a little bit different or a little bit special, is that neither one or the other have full control of the interaction. They both have, they share the control. So mom is offering different things, but the little girl is really ultimately choosing what they're gonna be using and what they're gonna be playing with. So mom offered the maracas. It seemed like the little girl was super into it, so she decided to ask for it. She was really liking it. And then at some point, mom was going to go back to the same drum we saw during baseline video. And clearly she doesn't like it, but this time she had a way to communicate it. This time she had a way to say, I want something else, and ask for the guitar instead. So this mom is not implementing with fidelity, so it's not implementing perfectly, but we see that just even with those little changes that mom is making, we see the difference in the responses from the little girl, the level of control that they both have, and overall the quality of the interaction has increased. So let's keep going so I can tell you a little bit more about those little things that mom learned during that program. So, like I mentioned a little bit before, there's actually quite a bit of evidence behind PRT. These are just a couple of articles that were pretty important. 1987 was the first article that talked about the natural language paradigm, which was actually the first name for pivotal response treatment, natural language paradigm. And if you see, actually was published the same year as the Lovas article, or the famous Lovas article about the 40 hours a week and after 2 years of treatment. So really PRT has been around for quite a bit. Then they started looking into, let's specifically look at PRT with children with autism. And so we see the 2003 and then we see the 2006. But again, there's plenty of research happening on PRT. There's more and more every day. So there's a lot of things that you guys can find about PRT. Like any other behavior analysis-based intervention, there's lots of data collection. There's a lot of things that we really evaluate to make sure that the intervention is being effective and it's working for the child that's receiving it. So the first thing that we look at when we implement pivotal response treatment is the fidelity of the implementation. So we look at the parent or the adult that's implementing. And the reason is because we want to make sure that the person is implementing correctly before we make any changes in the treatment plan saying, oh, this is not working, let's change it. Because if the adult implementing is not implementing correctly, then is it really that PRT is not the right fit for this child, or is it that we're implementing something similar to PRT but not quite it? So again, we look for an implementation of 80% or above to say, okay, if the child is still not making progress, then it might not be the right fit. But that's the first thing we really focus on. The next thing is a communication probe and looking at responsivity. So how much is the child responding to language opportunities or learning opportunities presented by the adult? Okay, so we want to, obviously we would love our kids to respond to 100% of opportunities that we present. That's not quite realistic. That doesn't happen. Definitely not with typical kids either. So depending on your goal, you're going to have a different mastery criteria for that. But in general, for vocal responses, we look at overall 80% responsivity. So 80% of the time that I present a language opportunity, we're going to get a response from our child. And then we also collect data on many other operationally defined target behaviors. So we can take data on overall eye contact, we can take data on overall engagement, we can really on anything, right? And motivational procedures that we're going to talk about soon can actually be implemented to teach a child to write, a child to read, to color, to sit on the chair for a certain amount of time, and so on. So really we could work on a lot of these things, but my main focus on these presentations is going to be on language. But I just want to give you guys the kind of like the heads up that with PRT you can really work on any target behavior. Okay, so talking about PRT being based on applied behavior analysis, let's review really quickly the three-term contingency, which is the ABCs of behavior analysis. So really quickly, so we know that the ABCs stand for, oh, I don't know why I went forward. There we go. I think I'm doing that. Okay, I'm gonna leave it alone. Antecedent is an instruction, event, or anything that happened in the environment that really occurs before the behavior, that elicits that behavior to happen. Okay, so it doesn't have to be always telling somebody to do something. It can be an event, or it can be a big noise or a big sound. It could certainly be your phone ringing elicits your response to actually pick up the phone, for example. Or it can be something different, like a sink full of dishes actually gets you to do the dishes. If the sink is empty, you wouldn't just randomly start doing dishes that don't need to be done. Now we can go. So the B stands for behavior, is the action, is what the person actually does. And C is the consequence, is the presentation or removal of something immediately following the behavior, which affects the behavior occurring in the future. So the C is really critical because based on the consequence that you get after engaging in a certain behavior, you're going to decide to do it again or not. Okay, so let's say, for example, looking at the ABCs, you sit down to watch TV, okay, in your house, and you pick up the remote and you try to turn the TV on. And that would be, so that's what we're going to do. That's the setup. When you try to turn the TV on, the remote does not work for you. So the remote not working is your A. So what do we do sometimes when the remote won't work? Let's say some people might shake the remote. Some people might tap the remote, right? Some people might hit the button harder. So we all do something to make it work, and that would be our B. What do we do when the remote doesn't work? So let's say, and I'm going to use my example, that what I do is actually I tap the remote on my hand. And after I tap the remote on my hand, I try to turn it on, and now the TV works. Okay, so my tapping worked. So again, my A is the remote didn't work. My B, I tapped the remote on my hand. C, it worked. So what do you guys think I'm going to do next time that I sit down to watch TV at home and the remote doesn't work? I'll do the same thing. Why? Because it worked. And that's behavior analysis right there. So how do we look at behavior analysis in terms of PRT? And like I said, I'm going to focus on the language component of PRT. Okay? Let's do this. Perfect. That's easier. Okay, so how do we use the ABCs and the knowledge that we have about the ABCs with the A eliciting responses and the C maintaining or increasing responses to really teach the child to use vocal communication, okay, which is our goal. So the A is our prompt or a cue. It is our learning opportunity. We present it to the child, okay, in the most natural way, but it can be a setup, okay. Our B is the child responds with what we want them to respond, what we're teaching. And C, they get access to a reinforcer. So in PRT specifically, the child receives a natural reinforcer, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So you see that PRT is based on the principles of behavior analysis following the ABCs, just like discrete trial would. Okay? All right, so let's look a little bit about one of the biggest differences, I guess, or one of the things that really characterize pivotal response treatment. And that is that pivotal response treatment focuses on pivotal areas of development. And what that means is instead of focusing on teaching one skill at a time, pivotal response treatment focuses on how do we look at those areas in development that if we target those and we really teach those, learning is going to happen a lot more naturally, it's going to happen a lot faster, and generalization will happen easier. Okay, so there are 4 main areas that have been studied. The first one is motivation, which is the one we're going to focus on today. So to learn new things and engage in social and communicative interactions, we all need motivation. And we know that in general in our lives, when we're motivated to do something, we tend to do it better. And we tend to initiate it versus having somebody telling you to do it. The next pivotal area is responsivity to multiple cues. So most of us, when we learn different things, when we were little, different things, we didn't have to learn literally item by item. So for example, I have a blue mouse here, this way, blue mouse and a black mouse, okay, that I use for the computer. When I see them, I see the common characteristics of a mouse. So I know automatically if tomorrow I go to a store and I see a pink mouse, I'll be able to recognize it no problem, right? Because I focus on the correct characteristics of it. I didn't focus on the color necessarily. I focus on the fact that it has a button on the left, a button on the right, has a little wheel on the top. You put a battery in the bottom. So there are different characteristics that I look for when I'm looking at a mouse. So when I go to the store, when I see somebody else using a mouse that's completely different in color or other characteristics, I'm going to look for the key features. Many times individuals with autism have a difficult time looking at the key features of items, and they over-select to the wrong thing. For example, in this case, you might have a child that over-selects to the color. So when you teach him a mouse, he might think blue is what's called a mouse. So when you show the black mouse, he might have a hard time understanding that it's the same thing. Okay, so if we start teaching kids to really look at the key characteristics and focus on the right things, then they don't depend on us teaching every single item. Hopefully they'll generalize faster. The next one is self-initiations. We know that a lot of our kids are really, really good at responding, right? Because that's what they've been practicing from the beginning. Adults or other people offer opportunities, and they've gotten really good at responding to those opportunities. But a lot of our kids really have a hard time initiating on their own, starting an interaction, okay? So that's what we're looking at, is how do we teach our kids to value initiating with others? And then the fourth component is, or this fourth pivotal area is self-management. We all know that we're supposed to behave differently based on where we're at. So we behave differently if we're at the library, or if we are at a party, or if we are at work, and so on. So we all have that ability, for the most part, to manage our own behavior. So what we want is for our kids and the individuals with autism to be more independent managing their own behavior versus always depending on us as the therapists telling them how they're supposed to behave. Okay, now you're supposed to be quiet. Now you're supposed to be loud. We want to make sure that they recognize things in their environment that are going to tell them how they're supposed to behave. Okay, so now let's look at the motivational procedures of PRT. Let's start looking at the implementation and the practical strategies that you guys can use when implementing pivotal response treatment. Okay, so I'm just going to name them now and then go one by one. So we have shared control, child attention, clear prompts, direct and natural reinforcers, contingent, reinforcing attempts, maintenance tasks, recasting, and creating natural opportunities. So let's just go ahead and go one by one. It will make a lot more sense. So, like I mentioned in the last video, is in PRT we really don't want the child to be in complete control. We don't want the adult to be in complete control. We want to make sure that it's a shared control. They both are part of that interaction. And the reason is because that's how most interactions are, right? If you have an interaction that constantly there's one person that is overly active and the other person is overly passive, those interactions are not going to last very long. And definitely relationship-wise, it might be a little bit harder. But when both people contribute and when both people have some sort of control and it's a give and take, the quality of those interactions are going to be higher. So that's what we look at. So for under shared control, there are some strategies that we use. And the first one is following the child's lead. When we do what we like to do, automatically our motivation is going to be higher. Okay? So if I choose what to use to read, most likely I'm going to read that book with a better attitude, a lot faster. But when somebody else tells me what to read, regardless if I like it or not, most likely my motivation is going to be fairly low. Okay, and I might read it because I have to, but I'm not necessarily going to enjoy it. So that's one of the things, is if we follow the child's lead, if the child is choosing the activity he or she wants to play with or use, automatically the motivation to learn with that activity is going to be a lot higher. That doesn't mean that we're going to have to follow our child's lead forever, every day, at all times, because that's not realistic either. But you're going to see how we can embed some shared control on things that we still need the kids to do. Okay? Kind of going with that child-directed child choice. That's a very important one too, especially when we try to incorporate these motivational procedures when the kid has to do something. So for example, it's bedtime, okay, and the child is supposed to go to bed at 8. Let's say that's the time that you want them to go to bed. And every time it's a struggle. So maybe one way that we can share some control is giving them a choice. Do you want to go to bed at 8 or do you want to go to bed at 8:05? Really, 8:05 is the same thing as 8. So for us, it doesn't make that big of a difference. But for the child, 8:05 might be the world. And automatically, because he or she chose it, then motivation to go to bed might change and might be a little bit higher. Still not thrilled, because they would prefer to play, but at least you are helping them be more at peace with the idea of going to bed because they chose the time they were going to bed. So that's just an example. The next one is identify natural reinforcer and gain control. And we're going to talk about natural reinforcer in just a little bit, but basically is once the child is playing or interacting, or let me backtrack. So once the child is playing or using a toy, for example, or an activity, what about that activity is so special? So let's say they're playing with Cookie Monster, right? One of those Cookie Monster dolls that eats the cookies, makes noises, does a little dance. And they always go for Cookie Monster, and they love Cookie Monster. So what about it? Is it the sound of Cookie Monster? Is it the movement of Cookie Monster? Is it the pretend component of Cookie Monster? What about Cookie Monster? And what that allows us is to really use that main component that they're motivated by to teach. Also, identifying what about Cookie Monster will allow us to identify other toys that could be similar that are going to help us really teach other things and to expand their play. So shared control, I've already kind of explained. We want both parties to be in control of the interaction. So for example, the child picks the toy, but the adult picks the target behaviors that they're going to work on. The adult chooses what to teach with Cookie Monster, for example, and then provide choices. So now let's go ahead and look at a couple of videos. In the first video, you're going to see this little guy. You won't see the person implementing because she's holding the camera, but she's providing a lot of choices to him. So they're playing with felt board, and the adult is giving different pieces to this child, okay? But you're going to see the amount of choices that she provides to him. There we go.
What color do you want? Do you want orange or blue car?
Blue car.
Blue car.
What color do you want?
Do you want orange or blue car?
Blue car.
Blue car.
Blue
Do you want a car or a mouse?
car or a mouse?
A mouse. A mouse. A green mouse.
Green.
Do you want a red mouse or a yellow mouse?
Or a yellow mouse.
A yellow.
All right. So in that video, you saw how they both have some control. So he probably chose the activity, but the adult has control of that activity. The adult has the bucket full of pieces, and he's motivated to interact with her because obviously she has what he wants, and she is providing the opportunities that are appropriate for him to learn. Okay. In this next one, it's going to be more focused on following the child's lead, and you're going to see how this child is playing with a gear toy and he kind of gets tired, or maybe it was just too hard for him. So he decides to go to a toy that seemed to be free, meaning I don't have to say anything and I'll be able to play with it. But then you're going to see how he goes back to the gears because the gears really are more motivating. Let me find that.
On. 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 Car. Car. On. On.
So in these videos, as you saw, it is easier to go for a toy when I don't have to interact with somebody else. But her following his lead and really identifying exactly what he wanted is what got him to say, you know what, this interaction is worth it. Using this word is worth it. Okay, yes, it's a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. So now the next one, it's child attention. And this motivational procedure sounds pretty obvious, but it's pretty amazing how many times we start talking to our child and giving him instructions or giving him language opportunities without necessarily getting that clear attention. He's ready or she's ready to respond to us. So We want to make sure that obviously our question, instruction, and opportunities to respond are clear, are appropriate to the task. So the child needs to know what we're asking from him or her, that it is appropriate for their skills. Another thing is we want to make sure that our opportunities are uninterrupted. So we don't want to be giving this child an instruction and then get distracted, look to the side, talk to somebody else, and expect the child to be following this whole thing. Probably we want to make sure that our opportunities are very clear and uninterrupted. And again, the child must be attending. So how do we know when our child is actually attending? So some of the things that we can look for are, is the child looking in my direction? Okay, so that's the first one. Is the child looking in the direction of the toy I'm offering or the activity I'm offering? That could be another way the child is showing you I'm ready. Another one would be if the child is reaching for the item that I'm offering. Again, any way the child shows you I'm ready to respond, that's the moment you want to provide that opportunity. If the child is distracted with something else and you provide a language opportunity, the chances of that child responding are actually very, very low. So I want you to focus on this video on all the things that the therapist does to get this child's attention. So they're playing with this pig, and it's a flying pig, we call it, but I want you to see how she uses the pig to really get the child's attention. So she like bounces the pig, moves the pig, but she really doesn't necessarily call his name over and over again. She actually doesn't. She uses other ways to get him to look at her. When he's distracted, she just waits. She gets his attention, and then she provides the language opportunity. Let me find it.
Ready, set, go. Go! Hit it! Very nice. There you go. Yeah, ready. Okay, make him fly. There you go.
And this is one of my favorite videos in PRT because it really shows the motivation that the child has. He could just easily walk away. He could easily just play by himself with the pig, but he chooses to play with her because the whole part of this interaction is to really enjoy the time with her, right? And seeing the pig fly and seeing her do these silly things catching the pig. But in general, going back to child attention, she does a lot of different nonverbal things, right? Nonverbal cues to get him to attend to her, and then she provides those language opportunities. When he's looking to the side, she just waits, or she goes at the end, and that just gets him to be back and be ready for her. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about clear prompts. So what are those language opportunities that we're talking about when we're talking about vocal communication, okay? So what is that A? When we provide that language opportunity, what does that look like? So it's clear. ask. Can you guys hear me now? Okay, perfect. All right, so when we provide language opportunities, we want to make sure that we do it as clear as possible. The child needs to know what I'm asking from him or her, okay? And when we talk to one another, in general, we don't necessarily ask questions over and over again. Questions are just one language opportunity that we provide to each other, but there's many others. So the first one is a verbal or a model prompt. And the model prompt is literally, we just say the word or the phrase that we want the child to repeat exactly the same. We're looking for an echo, okay? So the first one up here is, the model prompt is ball. So I would grab a ball and show the child a ball and say ball. The child gives me either an approximation, a sound, a complete word based on their language skills. As soon as the child gives me ba, I give him that ball, okay? Another one would be green ball. The child says green ball. The child receives the green ball, okay? So we're looking really for an echo on the model prompts. The next one is a time delay. And a time delay, it kind of leads more to independence. Time delays, I really, as the adult implementing, I just show the item, okay? Let's continue with our example of the ball. I have a ball in my hand and I just show it to the child. And I wait. The child vocalizes something that's related to the task. Okay, it can be ball, it can be the color of the ball, it can be play, it can say give me, anything that's related to that item. As soon as the child says something, I'll give it to him. Again, what I'm looking for is for the child to become more independent. And again, time delays really lead to those initiations that we were talking about before. The next one is questions, which are very, very common, and is one of the things that we actually have to be fairly careful with, because we tend to ask a lot of questions to kids, even when we interact with a newborn, right? We bring the baby home, and a week later we're asking him, "Are you okay? How are you doing, baby?" Right? And we know the baby's not going to respond to us, but that's our way to really interact with everybody. The problem is when our kids don't respond to questions, they know we're asking a question they're supposed to respond to, and they're choosing not to. And that's okay. So we don't want to show that to our kids. We want to show them whenever I offer you an opportunity, we want to get a response. Okay? So that's something to really keep in mind when you're interacting with a child, is how many questions am I asking and how many of them are they actually answering to? So there's different types of questions, of course. So not every question is the same. We have WH questions, but that are very label specific, or that are easier to respond to. Like, say, for example, what color? The child responds to the color of the item, and then the child receives that item. So for example, with my mouse, what color? The child says blue. The child receives the blue mouse. But then you might also have WH questions that are a lot more abstract and broad. What do you want to play with? The child vocally responds, tells me what he wants to play with, and then he receives or she receives that desired item. What do you want to play with? Cookie Monster. And then we go and play with Cookie Monster. So you see how even the same language opportunity, one question can be way different and way more challenging than the other question. Again, really being aware of the questions that we ask, the type of questions that we ask, and which questions our kids are really successful with, or which questions they're struggling with. The next opportunity is a carrier phrase or a fill-in. You can see it either way. And that one is anytime the child needs to complete something that we start. So 1, 2, the child has to say 3, and then they receive the reinforcer. So let's say, for example, we're in the playground and we're in the slide and I'm holding the child 1, 2. As soon as the child says 3, whoo, he can go down the slide. Okay. So when we read a book, brown bear, what do you see? And the child needs to complete that. So we can certainly use fill-ins with things that are fairly repetitive to get the child to really respond to us and using that language. Then we have choices, red or blue. The child responds with color that they want, and then they receive that appropriate item. Actually, let me back really quickly before we move on from clear prompts, is different prompts are going to be more challenging or easier for different kids. So for example, you might have a child that responds really well to model prompts and really struggles with choices. So part of what we do when we collect data on responsivity is we really look at the language opportunities the child is successful with and which language opportunity the child is struggling with. Because what we want is to really look at what are the things that we want to teach our kids, what are the things that we can use all the time, and so on. But this really gives you pretty good input on why is my child responding better to one person over the other. Because maybe the other person, this adult, offers a lot of questions and the other one offers a lot of model prompts or a lot of choices. So that gives us a little bit of input on what's happening there, okay? Of course, we want to make sure that we start slowly and we pick the opportunities that the child is most successful with. We don't necessarily need to target all these different language opportunities at the same time. The next one is direct and natural reinforcers. So the direct and natural reinforcer is the natural consequence to our behavior. So it is directly related and functionally related to the behavior that we engage in. So if I go to a restaurant and I order chicken, what do I get? I should get chicken, right? If I get steak, I'm going to either just eat it, but I might just tell the waitress, just say, hey, I actually ordered chicken, not steak, right? Because chicken is the natural consequence. So when the kids learn that their behavior is functionally related to what they're going to receive, they're more motivated to say it. So when I interact with you and I get something that makes sense, okay, I'm more willing to interact with you. So let's go ahead and watch this video, and I want you to focus on really how the reinforcer changes within the same activity. So this child picked the gear toy, and within the gear toy, you're going to see how his motivation changes from one thing to another.
Spin, 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 spin. Here. 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 Turn it around this way. There you go. Here. Here. Here.
Okay, so in this video you saw how the natural reinforcer at the beginning was spinning and watching those gears spin, but when the gears fell off, automatically the reinforcer changed to actually put in the gears on. So within the same activity, that motivation piece can change. What is the piece that they like the most? Because that's what you can use to teach. Now let's talk about contingency, because this is really what makes ABA interventions different than a lot of other interventions out there, which is the reinforcement is contingent upon the child's behavior. What does that mean? The child gets access to that reinforcer only if they engage in the behavior that we're trying to teach. Of course, we want to make sure that we're immediate, dependent, and the reinforcer is appropriate. So here are 3 videos that I want you to focus on and the different contingencies that we have in place. So in this first video, the adult is contingent on the child giving us an appropriate sound without crying. Let's see.
Wow, you ate one
Cereal.
Martina?
Cereal. Cereal.
Yeah, really well.
Cereal. 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 Cereal.
Okay, so on that video, you saw how she really didn't reinforce the crying. When he was crying, she completely turned around. But as soon as he gave that appropriate sound, he got access to that reinforcer. So now let's look at, let's see. Here, I'm sorry, we're kind of running out of time, I'm just realizing. In this video, you're going to see how the adult is contingent on the child's eye contact at the same time that she is actually responding with the word. Not just
That's
the word.
awesome.
Open.
Open?
She doesn't look.
Open.
Open?
Okay, so you saw in that video, when she responded without eye contact, the adult didn't give her the reinforcer, but when she responded with the eye contact, then she actually received it. So now let's look at reinforcing attempts. And obviously we would love our kids to respond perfectly from the beginning, but that's not quite realistic. And it's actually not fair, right? In the natural language, when kids are learning to talk, they usually start by cooing, then they start babbling, then they start giving us approximations, and they finally say words and then combine words and so on. So why do we have to expect something different from a child with autism just because he's older? So we want to make sure that we follow that. Okay, so we really, really reinforce attempts because we want to reinforce trying, and trying increases motivation. So I'm going to show you a before and after video, same program that the originals video that I showed you. So after 4 weeks, you're going to see the difference in his language. So in this first one, you're going to see, give me 1 second. So in this first one, you're going to see the therapist reinforcing very, very small sounds that are almost hard to hear. But this is what he had at the beginning.
Puffin? Puffin. You are just soft like a little bird. Puffin? 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 Puffin?
So you saw even in the same video, he actually got louder. But still, and puffin, they don't sound close at all. But still, she reinforced those. So this is at the end of the program, so week 4, and you're gonna hear how he is actually shaping his sounds. And this is the first time he's doing it, so you're gonna see her face.
Cookie! Yay! Cookie? Cookie! Cookie! Nice. Nice job, buddy. Oh, it's stuck. There you go. Yay! Yay! Cookie? Cookie! Yay! Yay! Cookie? Cookie.
All right, so you heard that in only 4 weeks, he was able to go from a very small sound to actually saying a very close approximation to cookie. So that's very exciting. Of course, not every child will respond so quickly, but we do see that progression fairly common. Usually, actually, we see it with most kids. So now let's talk a little bit about maintenance tasks, so versus to acquisition tasks. So in the regular teaching model, we teach, right? And we use those things that the child needs to learn, and we kind of bombard them a little bit. In PRT, it's the total opposite. 80% of the opportunities that we present, we try to make them maintenance tasks, easy. The child doesn't even have to think about them. And only 20% of the tasks that we present are acquisition. And the reason is because if we do things that we're successful with, our motivation will stay up. As soon as we start doing things that are difficult, our motivation will go down. Okay? Of course, we're going to make sure that we intersperse those tasks, meaning we want to do easy, difficult, easy, difficult, easy. We don't want to do 8 easy in a row and then 2 hard back to back. Okay, we want to make sure that they are pretty varied. Okay, so in this quick video, you're going to see how the child is responding with go, which is very easy for him, but then she's going to ask for a color, which is not as easy for him. Actually, don't see this video here. Oh, there it is. Oh, move is the word. That's easy.
Why do you want to jump into the... Sean, come here!
We got good headphones. Move. Move! What color? Yellow! Awesome!
So for this child, the word move is easy. That's not what we're teaching him. That's just to get him going to continue the interaction. What we really are teaching him is colors. So you saw how she really embedded that color question within a lot of easy questions. So after that example, after that opportunity for colors, then she would just go right back at an easy task. Okay? Again, that just increases motivation. Recasting is just how we expose our kids to a more appropriate or more correct way of saying the same thing that the child is saying, or actually to expand it. So the recast happens in the consequence, okay? So while we are providing the child with the reinforcer, we say the word or we say an expanded phrase as we're providing that reinforcer. So for example, in the first line is we offer the child ball. The child says ba. And as I'm giving him the ball, I'm going to say ball. Again, this just exposes the child to the correct word twice. The child is not expected to say ball after my recast. He's just hearing it again. Okay, and basically I'm saying, because you tried, you're getting it, but this is how you say it correctly. Okay? The next one is, how do we expand our kids' language from 1 word to 2 words? Or from 2 words to simple phrases, right? And that's usually a tricky decision to make. So when we're not quite sure, but the kid seems to be getting ready to do so, we can use our recast to start exposing them to longer phrases. So for example, ball, the child says perfect ball, and as I'm giving the ball to him, I go green ball. So the child hears another way longer on how to request for that green ball. Again, the child is not required to say green ball after the recast. We're just exposing the child to that other language. And last but not least, creating opportunities in the natural environment. This is going to, again, embed that generalization component into our teaching. There are language opportunities everywhere we go, not just in a therapy session. Actually, we want PRT to look as natural as possible. If it looks like a therapy session, probably we're missing some components. We really want parents to implement this in their natural day. So one of the things that we always tell the parents that we work with is we know our kids extremely well. So we know when the kid walks in a certain way, that means they're hungry. When they look at you in a certain way, that means they're sleepy. When they do certain things. So we try to really understand our kids' overall behavior and really just give things to them, right? So since we know it, let's use that as a cue for us to provide an opportunity. So let's go ahead and provide some time delays. Let's wait for them. Let's use some fill-ins and carrier phrases. Let's use the famous inside out of reach. So let's go ahead and put those cookies in a clear Tupperware so the child can see the cookies are there but cannot get to them. Or for example, let's put something on top. Obviously make sure that the child doesn't climb up to get it, but something that they can see but they really need you in order to reach it. And the last one is breaking things up. So for example, instead of giving a whole cookie to a child or a whole baggie of snacks, of fruit snacks, let's go ahead and give them 2. And let's get them to request for more. Okay, that really just increases the amount of opportunities that we're going to have to teach. And obviously, in general, the more we practice something, the better we get at it. And last but not least, have fun. PRT should be, and it was designed to be, an ADA intervention that it is play-based. It is having a good time, because what we do know is that if the child is having a good time, learning is going to happen faster. And again, they start valuing those interactions. Our main goal with PRT is the child valuing being with me and learning with me versus is the child learning a color? I want the child to learn the colors at the same time the child is valuing learning the colors from me and playing with me. Okay, so that's the mixture that we really want to focus on when we look at PRT. And that is that. So we finished only 5 minutes after. So does anybody have any questions? No problem. Thank you guys so much. Okay. So I have somebody that has a question about data collection. Okay, so while I get the question about data collection, let me go ahead and answer the next question, which is if we would like to read further on PRT, what resources would you suggest? So there's a couple of really good user-friendly resources. There's been a couple of books that have been published. One that I always recommend people that are just getting introduced to PRT, and it's good for both clinical people and also parents or professionals and parents, is Overcoming Autism. And that is a book that was written by Lynn Cagle, one of the developers of PRT, and then also a parent that used PRT with her child. So it's a really great book to read. It talks about PRT, but it talks also about the experience that this mom had implementing PRT in the natural environment. So it gives pretty good insights. So that book is Overcoming Autism. The other one could be if you go to the Kagel Center for Autism in University of California, Santa Barbara, they have little manuals that you can get that are pretty inexpensive, and they have about many different things. So understanding the pivotal areas, teaching language skills using pivotal response treatment to early language learners, for example. They have, I don't know exactly the number of manuals that they've published at this point, but they have about, I think, about 10 or 12, which are really user-friendly and really practical. So those would be the first resources that I would go to, all right, to read more about PRT. Let's see. Let me look at the question about data collection. So it is responsivity taken out of ADC, or do you have any other system to recommend? Yes, so we actually do have a specific data sheet that we use for responsivity, and basically what it looks like is each language opportunity that you provide, you just mark, was it a model prompt, was it a time delay, was it a question, was it a fill-in, and you basically mark this type of opportunity was presented, let's say a model prompt, and did the child respond or not? So you mark it in a different way if the child responded. At the end, let's say after 10 minutes of implementing PRT, which is usually what we do. We usually do 10-minute probes. So after that, and you collected data on each opportunity and the type of opportunity you presented, then you can look at, I presented 15 language opportunities and the child responded to 10. And then you get your percentage on that, right? Another thing you can look at is the types of opportunities. I presented 8 model prompts and the child responded to 6 of them. Or I presented 8 questions and the child responded to only 1 of them. So that's kind of how you want to go about it. Can you write? Yes. So Kagel is written like, yeah, so for responsivity, that's kind of how you want to do it. You want to look at each separate language opportunity you provide and what type of opportunity it was, and then you mark if the child responded or did not respond. And then you look at your percentage of responses. And I see that. Perfect. Thank you for sharing that link for the books and manuals. Is any other questions? It's similar. So the Denver model is also a naturalistic teaching approach that has certain things that definitely are similar to PRT. It's not exactly PRT, but definitely has some overlap with it. But they do have some differences. But they're both naturalistic teaching procedures that are play-based. Any other questions? Nothing else? There we go. Maybe one more. Okay. All right, so it seems like we might be done. I probably should have written it in the last slide. So I'm gonna just write my email address. If somebody has any other questions, you can certainly write me an email. It's BORR@autismcenter.org. And that's where you can find me. So feel free to send me an email with any other questions, or if you're looking for any other resources, and I'll be happy to answer. Oh, thank you all so much. It was great.